Welcome to the Philosophy Cafe. Today we're doing a deep dive into an idea that is, well, it's so profoundly simple, but it completely changed how humanity sees itself and really the entire cosmos. We are talking about Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution by natural selection. The sources you sent over, they all frame this as like the ultimate scientific unifier.
They do.
So our mission today is to figure out why this one idea from On the Origin of Species caused such a huge shift and why it's still the common language for all the natural sciences.
Okay, so let's use a tech metaphor here. Let's think of it as a revolution.
A revolution.
A total one. If you're looking for the biggest intellectual leap forward ever, evolution is right up there with, say, Newton discovering gravity or Copernicus realizing the Earth orbits the sun.
That's a huge claim.
It is, but Darwin basically gave biology its operating system.
An operating system.
Yeah.
But doesn't that sort of imply someone wrote the code? A programmer.
And that's the beautiful tension, isn't it?
Because that's the exact opposite of what he found.
Exactly. Before Darwin, science was running on this faulty, closed system called natural theology. It assumed a programmer did write perfect code.
Right.
But once Darwin showed his evidence, the sciences went open source. Now, the foundational code for biology, geology, zoology, it's all evolution. It's the framework that makes everything else make sense.
To really get the impact, we have to picture the world he was walking into in the 19th century.
Yeah, it was a different mental landscape.
The accepted view was that God created all life perfectly, flawlessly, and unchangeably. And not even that long ago, the consensus was about 6,000 years. Right?
All done in 6 days. That was the literal interpretation, and Darwin's work just systematically took that idea apart.
And what always strikes me about Darwin himself is the irony. His dad was a doctor, his grandfather a famous biologist, but Darwin was, well, he was kind of an aimless student.
He loved collecting beetles, though.
Passionately. And then he goes to Cambridge to study theology, of all things. He was planning to become a clergyman, the very job that relied on the system he was about to smash.
It's incredible. He was training to join the very institution whose core beliefs he would go on to shatter. It just shows how real observation can overturn even the deepest traditions.
And the pivot point, that huge moment for him, came when he was just 22.
The voyage.
The invitation to be the naturalist on the HMS Beagle, a 5-year trip around the world, mapping South America, Australia. It was basically the most important field trip in the history of science.
It absolutely was. And that voyage, especially the stop in the Galapagos Islands, was the key. See, Darwin was a very careful thinker. He knew if you were going to challenge a 2,000-year-old idea, you needed a mountain of evidence.
And the data just started pouring in. He collected so many fossils, so many specimens.
And one of the first big clues came from those fossils. He found these giant skeletons of extinct animals.
Like giant sloths, right?
Exactly, and they were weirdly similar to the smaller sloths still living in the area. And that led him to his first crucial thought. Species change over time. They don't just vanish, they transform.
Which brings us to our first why. Why was that idea so dangerous? If creation was perfect and finished in one go, why were species changing? Why weren't they perfect anymore? The existence of those fossils alone invalidated the whole concept of a static, perfect design.
Precisely. The perfect creation story had a huge hole in it because the rocks were showing imperfection, extinction, and adaptation.
But the real lightning bolt moment came when he started comparing the animals in the Galapagos from one island to the next.
The finches and the tortoises?
It wasn't just that they were different from the ones on the mainland. They were different from each other, island by island, based on these tiny little environmental differences.
Okay, think about the finches. On one island, the main food is these big, hard seeds. So the finches there had these short, powerful, almost pincer-like beaks.
Like little nutcrackers.
Exactly like nutcrackers. But then you go to a neighboring island, and the main food is, say, nectar from flowers. And the finches there, they have long, delicate beaks, perfect for probing.
So it was a customized toolkit for each specific environment.
And that was the spark. Darwin realized these variations, the slightly longer beak, the slightly stronger one, they must have already existed in the original population.
Just by random chance.
Yes. And over time, the birds whose natural variations just happened to be best for that island's food source, they survived and had babies. The others, they starved. They perished.
So the environment wasn't creating the change. It was just a brutal filter, selecting the winners from what was already there.
And that leads us right to our second why. Why? If it's so logical, why didn't anyone else figure this out?
Good question.
The truth was, and it's something Darwin himself had to break free from, it was just false presuppositions. The religious framework acted like a mental block. It stopped people from seeing what was right there in front of them.
We should probably mention that Darwin wasn't totally alone in noticing that species change. There was the French scientist Lamarck.
Right, Lamarck. He saw the change, but he got the mechanism completely wrong.
He believed in the inheritance of acquired traits. His classic example was the giraffe, right?
The giraffe. He thought that ancient giraffes stretched their necks to reach higher leaves, and that little bit of extra length they acquired in their lifetime was somehow passed on to their babies.
So change was driven by effort.
But Darwin's observations just showed that was impossible. Think about it. If a very thin person spends years lifting weights and gets really muscular,
Their kids aren't born with huge muscles.
of course not, because that's an acquired trait. It's not in the genes. Lamarck thought physical effort could change the genetics of the next generation.
Which is the key difference. Lamarck saw change driven by effort. You're saying Darwin saw it driven by death.
Exactly.
Darwin agreed species changed, but he explained the cause was natural selection. So back to the giraffe. The original population had giraffes with all sorts of neck lengths due to random variation.
Most had shorter necks. A few, just by luck, had slightly longer ones.
And when the low-hanging leaves disappeared, the short-necked majority starved. They died off. Only that tiny minority with the slightly longer necks could eat, survive, and reproduce.
And over millions of years, that tiny, lucky group became the only group. They became the species we see today. It's not about stretching your neck. It's about being born with a better neck and surviving to pass that trait on.
So in Origin of Species, Darwin lays out two main theories. First, all life evolved from older, simpler species, common descent.
And second, that this evolution is the result of a blind, unguided process, natural selection.
And that second part is what really undermined the church's most powerful argument at the time.
The argument from design. The idea that if you see complex order, there must be a designer.
It's a very intuitive argument.
It is, but Darwin's mechanism takes the designer out of the equation. He basically said, look, that order you see, it's just the illusion of design.
What do you mean illusion?
Well, nature only looks designed because everything that was disordered or didn't work was ruthlessly eliminated. It's not that a designer knew giraffes needed long necks, it's just that all the ones without them died and were removed from the gene pool.
That's a brutal way to achieve perfection. And it reminds you, nature optimizes for survival, not for our comfort. You brought up the example of human birth.
It's maybe the starkest example of selection pressure. Think about it. Selection determined that the ideal delivery time for humans is about 9 months.
Okay.
Early in our history, as human skulls got bigger, women who gave birth too late, say at 10 or 11 months, they often died in childbirth. The baby's head was too big.
And the baby died too.
So that genetic line ended. But women who gave birth too early, say 6 or 7 months, their babies were often too premature to survive.
So that genetic line also had a high failure rate.
Right, so the genome that won, the one that survived and became dominant, was the one for women who delivered right in that 9-month sweet spot. It maximized the survival of both mother and child.
Efficiency born from immense tragedy.
There was no conscious design, it's just a statistical outcome. The cost of this progress is staggering. Thousands and thousands of imperfect creatures died over millions of years for the world to look the way it does now.
Which explains, pretty clearly, why his ideas were seen as so dangerous. The Bible presented a story of perfect, unchanging life, created very recently. Darwin showed the exact opposite. Everything is changing, imperfect, and incredibly, incredibly old.
And when he showed his fossils, religious leaders tried to come up with a counter-narrative. Some of them actually argued that the extinct animals he found were just the ones that refused to get on Noah's Ark.
Seriously?
Yes, and that God just created new replacement species afterward.
Kind of divine cleanup crew. But Darwin knew that wasn't it. Things didn't just disappear. They changed.
And this whole mechanism of adaptive selection, it has this one really profound societal implication. It proves without a doubt that all humans are fundamentally one lineage.
Let's unpack that because it's a huge point. The differences in human skin color can seem so significant, but they're really just a product of selection based on geography.
It's a perfect example, a trade-off.
Yeah.
Near the equator, you have intense year-round sun. So high levels of melanin, which create darker skin, were selected for because they protect against UV damage.
It's like built-in sunblock.
Exactly. But in far northern latitudes, where there's very little sun for much of the year, lighter skin was selected for because it's much more efficient at synthesizing vitamin D from minimal sunlight.
So if you had dark skin in, say, ancient Scandinavia, you'd likely suffer from vitamin D deficiency, which would have huge health impacts.
And you'd be less likely to thrive and reproduce. And the reverse is true near the equator. Selection simply favored the skin tone best suited for that specific place. We're all the same species, just fine-tuned for different compromises.
So let's use our time travel element to talk about the scale of all this. Because evolution is so gradual, Darwin knew the Earth couldn't be just 6,000 years old.
No way.
He realized that the planet had to be millions of years old for these changes to be possible.
He had to become a revolutionary in geology as well as biology. He just understood that the timescale had to be vast.
And today, we know he was right, even if his estimate was way too low. Modern science puts the Earth at 4.5 billion years old, with life starting about 3.5 billion years ago.
Just think about that. 3.5 billion years for a single-celled thing to become us.
And if we keep time traveling, we can jump ahead to 66 million years ago. Because there's a big element of luck in our story, isn't there?
Cosmic luck. The asteroid impact that wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs.
They dominated the planet. If that asteroid hadn't hit, the small mammals that were our ancestors would have likely just stayed in the shadows. They would have lost the struggle for existence.
It's very likely. That catastrophe cleared the stage and allowed a previously suppressed group to thrive. But it's crucial to remember that life found a way. The birds we see everywhere today are the direct descendants of dinosaurs.
Okay, so that brings us to our third and final why. What's the debate today? Darwin called it a theory, but with everything we know now, genetics, DNA, is it still just a theory?
No, not in the casual sense of the word. Today, evolution is an undeniable scientific fact.
So what sealed the deal?
Genetics, really. It provided the molecular proof. Darwin talked about random variation, but he didn't know what caused it. Genetics showed us it was mutations, random errors in the DNA code when it replicates.
So DNA provided the physical mechanism he had theorized.
It was the final piece of the puzzle. It showed exactly how traits were inherited and how they could change randomly. Selection then acts on those changes.
So if the science is settled, where does the philosophical conflict stand now?
Well, most major religious groups have accepted evolution. They tend to see stories like Adam and Eve as symbolic, not literal history. The final disagreement really comes down to interpretation.
How so?
Scientists see natural selection as operating purely by chance and environmental pressure. The remaining religious argument is that, yes, evolution is real, but that random process is actually guided by some kind of divine wisdom.
But either way, the mechanism of change evolution is accepted. And it gives us this incredible framework for understanding the entire history of life on Earth.
It really does. Which brings me to your 24-hour challenge.
Okay, let's hear it.
Next time you're out and you see a bird or a squirrel, any animal, don't just look at it. Pick one small feature, the thickness of its coat, the curve of its beak, the color of its fur, and ask yourself, what specific environmental pressure over millions of years caused the exact feature to win out over every other possible version?
That's a great challenge, a way to see the ruthless, powerful logic of selection playing out right in front of you.
Exactly.
A great way to connect billions of years of history to this exact moment. Thank you. This was an incredible deep dive. If you enjoyed this episode, please support the channel by liking the video and sharing it with your friends.